Welcome to another inspirational message from Chowdean Community Church, Gateshead. For more information about Chowdean, visit www.chowdean.org.uk. We hope you enjoy the podcast.
Yes, not many yeses, quite a few, not sure. Topic for this morning is I want to talk about the Son of God and the Son of Man. And I want to give it the title of What's in a Name? And you might think, why would you give it that sort of title? I'll tell you why. Because when I was preparing this message, I was thinking of when I was born, my mum christened me Samuel. Now, over the years, I've been called a number of names, some which I can't mention here, but some which I will. I've been called Samuel. I often got that from my mum when I was ever in trouble. Mum would be standing at the door and she'd be shouting, "Samuel, come here." So I knew when I heard the word Samuel, I was in trouble. Then, over the years, got called Sam, got called Sammy, got called Sambo, which isn't politically correct today, but back in the day, because when you got school photographs taken, they were taken in black and white. You didn't get coloured photographs, but on a black and white photograph, I stood out like a sore thumb. I appeared to have a black outlook on my face. I appeared to be from a different country, so people would often call me Sambo. Often, over the years, getting dressed up as various characters, I've been called Samantha. Yes. I didn't have a problem with that. It was just a case of we were doing it to dress up as various characters. But our series this morning is not about Sam, Samuel, Samantha. It's about encountering Jesus in two titles, Son of God and Son of Man. So I want us to look at the picture of the Son of Man and the Son of God. And I don't want you to look at it as a static picture, because he's alive today, just as he was back when he rose again. So I want us to think about that this morning. And I want us to look at this reading. Mark 14, verses 53 to 65. I chose it for two reasons. Because it mentions both Jesus as the Son of God and the Son of Man. I want to read it to you now. Follow it on there. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders and the teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. We heard him say, "I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days will build another, not made with hands." Yet even then their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am," said Jesus, "and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." The high priest tore his clothes. "Why do we need any more witnesses?" he asked. "You've heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, "Prophesy." And the guards took him and beat him. That's what I want to look at this morning. We know from the rest of the Gospels that the Jewish leadership had long been wanting to put Jesus to death. Quite simply, he upset the apple cart. He disturbed things. He called for change, radical change, and he condemned much that was wrong in the hearts and actions of the people. Nothing has changed back then as it is today. It's still the same today. And this upset many people. It upset the leaders so much that they were looking to kill him. The story tells of a trial. Jesus is brought before all the Jewish leaders and rulers. Witnesses are brought against him, all in an attempt to prove that Jesus deserved to die. This is Jesus' Jewish trial. It's the first trial because the Romans had occupied Palestine. Jesus also had to have a trial by the Roman governor, Pilate. The Jewish leaders did not have the authority to carry out death sentences. So after they decided someone should be put to death for breaking Jewish laws, they had to make a cause or a case for the Roman government before being able to carry out the sentence. So in this first trial, the concern of the Jewish leaders was to find evidence that Jesus had committed a crime worthy of death. The story goes on and tells of failed attempts to produce witnesses against him. And then we come to the climax of the story. The high priest takes over and questions Jesus. Maybe he can get Jesus to incriminate himself. The first question, unsuccessful. Jesus remains silent. But then the high priest asks him one important question. Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? You may have heard opponents to Christianity say that Jesus never claimed to be God. That calling him by the title Son of God is something that Jesus' followers made up after his death. I want to tell you this morning that is false. Here's one very plain example. True, the question is not, are you the Son of God? It is, are you the Son of the Blessed One? You might ask yourself the question, why the different words? I'll tell you why. Because the Jewish leaders almost never used the name of God for fear of taking it in vain. Unlike today, people take the name of God's name in vain. For in those days, that would be classed as breaking the commandment. So they used lots of other terms for Jesus, for God. Sometimes calling God the Lord, sometimes calling him the name, and sometimes using the term which was described here, the Blessed One. There's no doubt to me that that is what Caiaphas is doing here. He's asking as plainly as he can if Jesus is claiming to be the Son of God. And we read Jesus' reply in verse 62, and he simply says these words, I am. I am. So it's clear that Jesus claimed to be the Son of God. He claimed to be divine, to have the ability to forgive sins and to heal and to command the forces of nature. And once more, he proved it. What does it mean for you and me? It means that Jesus was not just a good moral teacher. He wasn't merely a good example or an ordinary priest. He was and is the one and only Son of God. And he demonstrated that most fully by rising from the dead, by being crucified, yet emerging from the grave victorious. That's the God that we serve this morning, the Son of God. It's the most unique teaching of Christianity in comparison to other religions of the world. The one we follow still lives. Jesus is alive today, and he reigns forever, today and forever. Why? Because he's the eternal Son of God. I want you to focus on that this morning, that the Jesus we serve is indeed the Son of God. It means, I said it like at the beginning, I don't want you to look at a static picture of Jesus, because he's alive today. He's in and around everything we see, everything we do. Jesus is with us. It's not a history book that we read this morning. It's an account of his life. And we walk with him as our living Savior. Can you say that this morning? Jesus walks with me because he's my living Savior. We walk with him. We talk with him. We listen to him and we obey him. Or do we? I'll leave that one with you to answer, because that's between you and God. I need to tell you, we need to obey him because he's alive. He's in charge and he's powerful. Sometimes we forget that when we're going through trials. We forget that we serve a risen Savior and he's powerful and can be just as powerful in your life as he has been in other people's lives over the years. Maybe you're going through a time in your life where you begin to doubt that. Something's happened and Satan's crept in and made you take your eyes off Christ. Well, I want to tell you this morning, you can focus on Christ again. You can get back to where you used to be. So where do you need the touch of the powerful Son of God in your life this morning? I don't know. But I know that there's times in my life when I've needed the powerful touch of God in my life, when I've went through circumstances that haven't been ideal for me and I haven't dealt with them well. But Christ has came in and got me through them. I want to tell you this morning, church, if you're sat there this morning and you're in a situation and you're uncertain, you're not sure of whether you're still close to Christ or not, you can get back to him this morning. You can get back to him this morning and have that closeness that, for whatever reasons, has been lost. The Son of God, the one who would look at the entire Jewish leadership in the face and say to them, you need Christ. Do you need the powerful touch of God in your life this morning? Maybe you do in your marriage. Maybe you do in raising your children. We had the kids up this morning. Some of them couldn't answer, were afraid to, didn't want to, whatever. But I think it's important in raising our kids today that there's a Jesus significance in there for them to be aware of and for them to be given a choice in life. But what about you? Do you need victory over something that you're struggling with? Jesus says, bring it to the foot of the cross. Leave it with me and I'll get you through it. Why? Because he's the Son of God. He's the Son of Man. Do you need physical help? Do you need prayer for something physical that's stopping you from doing whatever you need doing? What an ideal place to come this morning to Christ and leave it with him. Maybe you have a mental health issue. Kareen mentioned there's a World Mental Health Day. 1 in 4 people in our society today will suffer from mental health issues. Wouldn't it be great to point them to the cross, to point them to Christ? Maybe you're out there this morning and you have some needs. Maybe they are mental health needs. Maybe they're physical needs. But I want to tell you this morning, you can leave them all with him. You can leave them all with the Son of God. Maybe it's setting you free from sin that just keeps coming back and dragging you down and dragging you down. I want to tell you this morning, the Son of God came to save. The Son of Man came to save you and I from all of these issues that might be getting to you. Why? Because we're his children. And as his children, he loves each and every one of us. Maybe it's bringing some boldness into your life to love people around you with the love that Christ showed to me and to each and every one of us again. Some of us struggle with that, to love the unlovable, to put an arm around someone who's maybe not like you. Kath mentioned when she came in this morning, when she was on holiday, she mentioned that they wanted to give some money to a tramp who was on the streets. And she was a bit scared, but she went and she gave the tramp some money in order for him to do whatever he wanted to do with it. But sometimes we need boldness to approach people like those in need. There are thousands and thousands of people in Gateshead in need of hearing the gospel. What an advantage we have, because we already know Jesus Christ as our Son of Man, our Son of God. And wouldn't it be great to serve the people of Gateshead with that knowledge and not keep it to yourself? That's why we have the coffee cart on a Friday night. And I'll tell you something now, what an experience that is when you're seeing people at the level that they're at. Yes, maybe they've had a pint or two, but they're sharing things with us, and we're able to say to them, look, we'll pray for you in that situation. I want to tell you, there are people in here this morning that will pray for you in the situation that you find yourself in. So where do you need the touch of the powerful Son of God today? I need to tell you, he's here. He hasn't left. He's here. But Jesus longs to come in power. All we need to do is let him. It sounds simple, doesn't it? And yet we struggle with it. It's hard because it means you and I have to let go of the things that we hold on to so he can take over and make a difference. It's struggle. We struggle with it. It means making him Lord instead of us trying to do something in our own capabilities, because we can't. We won't. We don't do it. It means making him Lord. It's making him in control of everything. That's a tough one, because I like to be in control. We all like to be in control of things that go on in our lives. But I need to tell you, we need to let go. Oh, it's tough. It's heart-wrenching. It's heartbreaking. But we need to do that this morning. And we've just got to allow him to be Jesus, the Son of Man, Jesus, the Son of God, in our lives. It means letting him do things his way and not my way and not your way. And I know that makes us feel uncomfortable. But he's asking us to give something up. And it's hard to give something up. I know that when we've been talking to these people in Low Fell, it's hard to give up drink. It's hard to give up drugs when you feel as though that's all I can cling on to. But we cling on to things as individuals, as people. And Jesus says, you don't need that. All you need is me. And all that you need is available this morning. He might ask us to change. Change what? Change the way you look at people? Change the way you talk to people? Change the way you deal with people who rub you up the wrong way. People who aren't on the same wavelength as you. Yet Jesus says, we've got to love them in the same way that I loved you. We've got to do that. It's hard. It's tough. He might simply ask us just to trust. We sing the song, don't we? Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and to obey. The question is, will we let him into our lives to do that? The problem with the Jewish leaders is that they refused to recognize God among them. He did all the miracles. He healed. He taught. He corrected. And yet Jesus didn't fit their mold. Well, I want to tell you this morning, we don't fit the mold that people expect of people from church. That might shock you. It might astound you. But I want to tell you, people are looking at you and I as men and women of God. And some of them don't like what they see. I need to tell you that because when there's one finger pointing at you, there's 20 pointing at me. And I'd like to think that I was doing the best I could here on earth with what gifts God has given me. God has given you a gift. It might not be to go out on the fell on a Friday night. It might not be to be able to pray with someone. But you might be a good listener. You might be out there and meet someone who just needs that hug. You might be out there who you just need someone who can listen and understand and just be with them. I've got a young lad that I'm currently working with. He's got ADHD. And I give his parents a break from the struggles that they have working with this 10-year-old boy. And one of the things they said to me was, we just want a bit of peace and quiet so we can allow ourselves to have a relationship with our youngest child. Because all our work and relationships are spent with the 10-year-old who has ADHD. So I've been taking this young lad out for the last few weeks, and I rang his mum the other day, and I'd said, how's things going? She said, oh, we're seeing a difference in him since you've started taking him out. I don't want the glory for that. We've seen a difference in him since you've started taking him out. He's more calm. He's a lot less noisier than what he was. And they believe it's because we've built up this relationship that allows me to share my life and share what he's going through, because we've all been through circumstances in our life that we can share with those we come into contact with. That's the beauty about being a Christian. You can share things that might have been rough and tough for you, but you'll meet someone out there who needs to hear the encouragement that Jesus can give in a person's life. But it means letting him do things his way and not your way. He challenged their expectations in this story. He didn't fit the mold, yet they refused to see God at work among them. They refused to believe. They refused to recognize the presence of the Son of God. There was God in the mix, but he didn't fit in the box. They rejected him. Question is, do we do the same? And I want to put it to you this morning, we dare not do the same thing. We dare not try to keep the powerful Son of God in a box of our own making. We dare not say he couldn't do that. Well, I mean, I guess he could, but he wouldn't, would he? He wouldn't do something spectacular in my life, would he? Well, maybe he would. Maybe he would. Maybe he will. But you've got to trust in the Son of God. And I believe Jesus wants to be the Son of God in power in your life and in my life. I believe he longs for that. He offers it. He desires it even now, to bring the power that will change you and I to be able to do the work that he set us out to do. The question is, will we let him or will we resist him? You see, there's more to the picture of God of power. In Jesus' answer to the high priest, he first claims the title Son of God. Then he uses a second title. The second title, Son of Man, is Jesus' favorite title for himself. In the gospel, we find it used almost 80 times. There's lots of debate over it, where it comes from, what it means, why Jesus uses it. That's an interesting topic for a small group of you and I to research in our Bible studies. That's clear to me from how Jesus uses it here. He quotes from the book of Daniel. This is what he says. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All peoples, nations, and men of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Do you see the picture of power in that story? He's given authority, sovereign power. Everyone bows and worships. He's king of a kingdom that cannot fail. King of a kingdom that cannot fail. We read the rejection of the Jewish leaders to Jesus' claims. The high priest tears his robes, declares Jesus a blasphemer, sentences him to death. And then an amazing picture, look what happens next. These men become violent. This group of prestigious men, proud, aloof, self-important, start to spit. They punch Jesus with their own fists and they mock him. For Jesus to claim to be the God of power, the Son of God, the Son of Man was too much for them to bear. And so they go as far as to get physical in their rejection of him. Really, this is where I see it all coming down to for us. Jesus made strong claims. He claimed to be the Son of God and the Son of Man. He claimed to be the God of power. The Jewish leaders rejected that claim and crucified him for saying it. Now the question is, how will you and I respond to these claims? I see three options here. To reject the claims as did the Jewish leaders, to accept the claims, or to try and ignore them. I doubt many of you would be here this morning if you outrightly rejected Jesus' claims. But what about the other two? Ignoring the claims. I want to be brutally honest. Power in other people's hands is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. We aren't generally afraid of power as long as we're in control or we feel we can manipulate it. As long as we meet our expectations and not God's. Because our expectations get in the way, allow us to feel we're in control, but we kind of ignore that. I think we're sometimes afraid to let Jesus be the God of power in our lives because we know it puts him in control instead of us. It makes him Lord instead of us being in control every step of the way in our lives, in our work lives, in our home lives, in our lives out there in the world in which we live. And we worry about what we might do if we really had the freedom that God allows us to have in Christ. That leaves me, the only good option is to accept his claims that he is the Son of God, that he is the Son of Man. So that's the message this morning, probably to me first and the rest of you. Jesus is the Son of God. He reigns in power. He's in control of every puff of wind, every chemical reaction, every drop of rain, and every moment of time. Jesus is in control. He desires this, to reign completely in our lives. My life, your life. And he wants to come in power. Sometimes power to change. Sometimes power to sustain. Sometimes in ways we can't see or understand. The question is, will we let him? Will we just give Christ the Sunday morning, the Sunday afternoon, and that's it? Because he wants us 24/7. The question is, will we let him? You see, you and I, Jesus Christ's heir, because it's for you and me that he died. That's why we can come. That's why we can expect God to move in power in our lives. He's adopted us into his family. I'm glad about that this morning. I'm in his family. We're in God's family. And he's in control. He's made us his children. And he's made us his heirs. He wants us to be free to move in power. Listen, if you want to be free this morning, come to the cross. Because that's where you'll find freedom. Freedom from the worries and the stress of life. And I believe this morning he wants to do that to you and me. I'm going to ask the band if they'll come up. Whilst they're coming up, I'm going to ask to put this video clip on. But I want you to focus on the caption at the end of it. You'll recognize it when you see it on screen. But I want you to think about this morning.
Cup of tea, dear. I'm down here, Mum. Oh. That's amazing. I know.
This is the end of this message. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want to find out more about our church, please visit www.chowdean.org.uk. And please take a minute to rate our podcast on iTunes.